Welcome back to the Kyero Pro podcast. In the last couple of episodes, we've been chatting with tech-forward estate agents to see how they've been implementing AI in their businesses. And today we are opening the kimono a little bit at Kyero to see how a leading international property portal is using AI in its business.
This is a big one, Martin. Kyero has a long-standing reputation for being a deeply human, relationship-driven type company, and agents often worry that tech dilutes that personal touch. So today, I am putting my estate agent hat on to find out how you, Kyero, balance machine efficiency with a brand built on human trust.
And to tell us all about that, we're joined by Eugenio Oliden, who's the commercial director at Kyero, and Nick Storey, who's actually everything else, but I think your title is operations director, Nick. Also with us is Alfredo, marketing consultant on the Costa del Sol, and I'm Martin Dell, one of the co-founders of Kyero.com.
And before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe, like, hit notification bells, all the cheesy things, because that way you'll know when we have another episode coming out, which is every Friday. Okay, so first question to Eugenio and Nick. So open, is Kyero using AI across all your departments, administrative, sales, product, and marketing?
Short answer, yes. But if your question refers to a big AI brain being used uniformly and autonomously across all departments, all processes throughout the business, then the answer might be no. Commercially wise, we are using AI in specific corners for specific processes where we know we can leverage AI, but it's not something that is widely spread across the company and used uniformly.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've been using AI for quite a long time, but not in the sense of the current influx of generative AI tools, so the ChatGPTs and Claudes and Geminis. So from an engineering and operational perspective, we've been using forms of AI because it's a really broad science for many years now, not just more recently.
So just to be clear, then we're talking about mostly workflow automations from Eugenio's point of view, and there is a thing in Kyero which we'll go on to in a future question called Prime AI. So I'm guessing that's some sort of deep core product algorithm thing. Is that right, Nick?
Yeah. So that's so we'll touch on it later, but that uses a part of AI called machine learning. So not something that's within ChatGPT, but is another form of AI.
Right, gotcha. So Eugenio, I know you have something called ARIS. In plain English, what is ARIS?
ARIS stands for AI Revenue Intelligence System, and it's basically the architecture that allows us to really leverage new technologies to improve our processes, our commercial processes specifically. It's basically a set of workflows containing a set of sequences with an AI layer on top that helps us decide with real-time intelligence which are the best action items that we should pick on. So if I would have to high-level explain it, that's what it is basically.
So Kyero has been automating for as long as we've been in business. How is this kind of automation different from what you've been doing previously?
Well, I think it's different, but it's not that different. That's a cheesy phrase, but that's the reality. So I don't know if you know this, Martin. I think I told you this once. But we had when we started this ARIS project by January 2026, so this is January, we had around 150 plus active workflows within HubSpot. So automation was something that we were really leveraging in order to optimize our commercial and operations processes. Now, what's different about this is that we, through AI and through a much more solid architecture, we condensated those 150 plus workflows into 4 of them, for example. And not only that, but the old school automation of if this happens, then that happens, is combined with an AI that's basically helping us decide if this happens, then this might be the best course of action. But hey, let me ping Eugenio to ask if he believes this is the best course of action, or let me ping Marcel to see if this is the best course of action. So AI is here to basically help us decide best course of action whenever the automation is lacking context,
So it sounds like it's less rules driven than the previous
It's less
stuff?
hard coded. Exactly. It's less hard coded, I would say. We do still have things that are hardwired within the automation. So if this happens, then that happens. But we now have in specific places, not all across the workflows, because that's something that also I believe people think that AI drives autonomously a whole process end to end. That's not the case. But for specific, in specific parts of the workflows, we do have AI helping us decide which is the best course of action. So I would say that's the main difference.
And while we're still sort of looking at ARIS, what was the problem with the original workflow solution in HubSpot that you were trying to solve with ARIS? What didn't the old thing do that the new thing does?
I think that the most important one is that we had workflows overlapping one over each other. So at some point, we were just solving operational blockers with a new workflow. Oh, maybe I could automate that so that I don't have to spend time doing that, so that I can do this other thing. That's a workflow. And so, maybe what if the code could be sent automatically once? Whoa, that's another workflow. So what happened in the end is that you ended up having 150 plus workflows, but you didn't really have an architecture that would allow you to track on pain points and improve the system itself. So the ARIS comes in, I believe, as a new way of dealing with automations and with dealing with commercial processes, because now we do have a structure. It's not yet there. I mean, we're far from being completed in this sense, but at least we know that we have an architecture that's sturdy enough, simple enough to really build on top of that. That's one thing. And the other thing had to do with data. So workflows were relying on a whole bunch of data sources, and you never really knew. We're still having that issue. Obviously, we're still working on that. But if something failed, you never really knew what failed because of the multiple data sources. So our CRM was hitting this database and that database and that database. So if the workflow within the CRM failed, you really had to start drilling through all of the databases to try to understand what failed. This new system that we're building has the principle of really having a consolidated database that we are hitting and we're actioning on top of.
So it sounds like rather than piecemeal solutions to individual problems, you've got the basis of an end-to-end system that has an idea of the whole process rather than just little bits of it.
Absolutely. And if you want to dig further into that, the ARIS system is basically built or composed by 4 workflows. So we replace 150 plus workflows with 4 workflows. General workflows that at the same time contain different sequences within them, but it's 4 workflows. So that gives you an idea of how we're tackling the whole automation within the ARIS system.
So Eugenio, just for those who don't really know what we're talking about, when we talk about workflows and this so on and so forth, give me just like a very rough example of one of these four workflows. I mean, we're talking a series of steps, aren't we, dealing with a particular channel? So just give me an example of this happens and that happens, just so we can get a context of what we're talking about here.
Well, for example, an example of that would be we have an outbound workflow. So an outbound workflow means that every proactive effort that we do as a commercial department, that can be onboarding, that can be prospecting, that can be retention activities. I mean, everything is condensated into the outbound workflow. And where AI comes in is, for example, deciding which is the best next prospect that we should speak to. Based on a series of rules and a series of skills, then the AI says, okay, from this list, this is the next prospect you should approach because X, Y, Z. So that's a specific example of how we build an outbound workflow with AI technology in it.
Right. So it's automating your contacts in your CRM, or not? Or
partially. I mean, is in part of the automation. It's not doing all of the automation. It could do all of the automation, but we're not just ready to do that. Like you could really have it. I mean, yes, you could leverage so that it could do end-to-end workflow and have it, hands-free. But we're not yet there, and I don't think because of what you said, because of the great customer service that we have, I don't think that would be one of the best decisions that we could take now.
Tell me a little bit more about that, just so we get the context again. So what would the customer service, how does that differ from, that's an inbound inquiry, I guess, right?
Yeah, for example, that's an inbound inquiry. Nick, for example, handles the inbound inquiries that comes from buyers. That's part of what Nick's automating with the data team. But in my case, for example, an agent that has a technical issue with the feed or with the export or with the listing that's not appearing as it should or whatever, that's an inbound inquiry, which is a completely different ecosystem from what we just spoke about, the outbound process. An inbound inquiry really requires us to be super, super, super sharp, because that's where the client relationship comes into the game. If the agent is inquiring about a feed export issue, we can't just guesstimate what the best answer is. So the idea is that the AI comes in, drafting an answer, for example, providing us with context. So this agent is querying about this. This is the context of this agent. Marcel should pick up on this one. Task for Marcel. Marcel reviews the client's history, reviews the draft email, tweaks whatever needs to be tweaked, and gets back to the agent. So you see the difference between the outbound process using AI and the inbound process using AI. That could be a good example.
Okay, and in a previous podcast, we had this concept of garbage in, garbage out, and the need to have clean data for these things to work, and for AI to even be able to make the right decisions or suggestions. How much of an issue has that been for you guys?
Nick, I think you might want to take this one, but I just give an open sentence. We're still working on that. It's been 6 months, and we're still working on that. And I don't think we're even near of having a finished base knowledge that we could really leverage. But Nick, this is your.
Yeah, it touches on something I was just thinking about in how, as a company, we use AI and how, I think thanks to Martin here, we, as a company, where there's we're all openly allowed to use AI. So I know sometimes you hear companies who aren't allowed to or restricted. So we've all been allowed to experiment. And I think one of the interesting things about ARIS is that I think typically database connections and CRM connections and sending emails and complex workflows and orchestration platforms. In this case, we use NA10. And I know in previous podcasts, there's things like Zapier, these kind of if this, then that. But this has been a commercially created workflow. So it's not an engineering workflow. So I think one of the things that AI has enabled is that AI has enabled Eugenio from a commercial viewpoint to start building this rather than it becoming an engineering project. And what tends to happen with engineering projects and commercial projects is that they clash at some point because they're coming at things from completely different perspectives and trying to solve two different jobs. So that's where, but that is where then, as Eugenio said, that's where the engineering can come in to help, is Eugenio can then recognize where the data isn't good enough or we're not serving the data in a clean enough way that makes his processes more complicated than they should be. So we're able then to just respond to requests to finesse the data. So Eugenio has access to all of the data, and then we can later find out, okay, what's actually needed? How do we need to present it just to make his life easier? But he's in control of creating the workflows. And I don't think that's something that typically would have been possible a few years ago without being able to rely on AI to create the AI workflow.
One last question from me on this, Eugenio. So is the objective of ARIS and this very, very consolidated automation that you set up to save money or to improve efficiency?
Maybe I think both. You save money. I mean, if you improve efficiency, you end up saving money. So that's always an end goal, to make the business as profitable as possible. But I think it's a matter of efficiency and really adding human value where we can add value. So I think I would add a third one, which is add human value to our relationships, basically. Because once we start automating all of the things that we have basically little or poor value on, we can focus on getting to our agents in a timely manner and in a really accurate way. So I think it's saving money, gaining efficiency, and adding human value to our connections.
And for context, just so people listening to this understand the size of the task, what sort of volume of information are we dealing with? Sort of like, without giving away trade secrets, we talking tens of thousands of contacts, hundreds of thousands of contacts, millions of, you know what I mean? What's the size of this data operation?
Hundreds of thousands of data points for sure. And I don't know, Nick might be a better prepared for this question, but I might even say millions of data points that we're working with.
And in terms of actual agencies that you're liaising with, each agency with multiple people, what are we talking about?
Thousands. I think we're on the thousands of thousands. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that the ARIS system is in and working. It's operational now, Eugenio. What does it do well, and what has been more difficult than when you initially set out?
Everything has been more difficult than what I thought initially, to be honest with you, because I think that's one of the traps that you get caught into whenever you start experimenting with AI. Everything seems really easy when you're on the surface, when you're actioning on the surface. Once you really start using AI to work with databases, to connect systems, etc., that gets really tricky. So, for example, we did like a deployment by phases. Okay, so the first part was basically migrating all of these HubSpot workflows to this ARIS system. That was sort of easy because the information was all stored within our CRM, clean enough so that the new ARIS system could use it. But once we started really saying, okay, so now we have CRM information, we have agents context, we want billing system to send us information about subscription terms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and now we want to hit this database to understand how the agent's performing so that we could better contribute to the agent context. So I would say that when we started to connect databases so that we could have a single source of truth so that the system could really leverage agents context, that got tricky. That got really tricky, and that's something that we're still working on. Yeah, and then the fine tuning of the drafts that the workflow creates, that's also something that we're struggling with. If you miss on a single step within the workflow, then the AI has not the full picture to decide whether to do this or that, and that's something that we're failing at this point in time. We're improving, we're getting better, but we're failing at that.
It's really interesting. It sounds like what I've been reading in general about AI is that the sort of legacy SaaS systems like HubSpot, they kind of do everything for everyone, but they don't work perfectly for any single client. They're this sort of big thing. But then when you come to build your own thing, you realize all of the detail, all of the ways it can go wrong. So it sounds like you've tripped over that.
100 times on a daily basis. So just to give an example, Marcel and myself get together on a daily basis. For those who don't know, Marcel is our basically A-star player. He's a little bit of data, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. He's a great professional, and he's really hands-on deck with technology and support and implementing this process with me. And we get together on a daily basis, and every day we're debugging the system. Every day on a daily basis, we're debugging something that appeared. So yes, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that people have regarding AI and regarding automation. It's just like you bad code something that you think will replace your CRM, you turn it on and you forget about it. That's not the case. I believe it's more is maybe more to the point of you start using your time for process optimization instead of for taking over emails, but you're still working. It's not that you are on the beach having a caipirinha and enjoying the AI system doing its own thing. And I think we came across that, obviously.
It reminds me of what we've heard from numerous guests, actually, that you need to be thinking of these systems as another employee. So, a new employee, you need to be coaching and training and giving feedback to, and it's the same with these systems.
100%. It has a ramp-up process. Yeah.
And now that it's in and working, you say you're sort of reviewing things with Marcel every day. How do you keep an eye on it, and how do you make sure it's not going rogue on you and sending messages and that are not what you intended?
Well, that's a good question. The system is basically built so that it escalates, not that it guesstimates. So if the system is not sure about what the next step is, it will escalate so that Marcelo and myself can review what happened there. It won't guesstimate what the best course of action is. So that's the first guardrail that we put in place, and I think that's the most important thing because of what we spoke earlier, our great customer service. So we're not gonna jeopardize everything that we've built so far in terms of branding and Kyero's relationship. So the idea is that every day we get together and we see all of the flags that the system has raised, and we start optimizing the process based on a consolidation of, okay, so this is what happened with this email, this is what happened with this workflow, this is what happened with this sequence. What's a common pattern here? What is it that we need to improve? Let's work on the improvement live, both together, back and forth, solve, play. Let's come again tomorrow and see how that goes. And tomorrow, maybe that's fixed, but we will find another bug. And the same thing happens. We go through the flags. We try to find a common pattern. We solve for that common pattern. We implement, and then we get back, the other day, and so on and so forth.
I think you raised two really important points there, Eugenio. I really like this principle of estimate, not guesstimate. I think so. That sounds like a sort of a baseline rule that's built into the system. And the thing that is really easy to skip over is that you've got a human review in the loop. I think people think that you, like you say, you press play and this thing just goes and dominates the world. But the human review is how you make sure it's doing what you built it to do.
Yeah, I mean, you could have an AI agent, an autonomous AI agent doing the review for you. I don't think that's the best way to do it if you really care about your business and you're not 110% sure that you have your house in order for that autonomous agent to have enough context to action on that flag or red flag or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So it's not that can't be done. I don't think it's the best way to do it. Even more when you're a 20-plus-year-old business, you have plenty of data sources, millions of data points that you need to connect. Humans, I mean, if you care about your brand, I mean, we care about our brand, we care about our connections. We need to be involved, 100%.
So I think from a wrap-up point on this, then, Eugenio, my understanding is it's something that keeps on coming up. And this is the easiest way to think about the relationship between the company and the workflow or the automation is exactly like if you had hired an administrative assistant to work their way through several things. And the newer they are, the more time you got to spend with them. And as they get better with the job and you have more confidence in how they're working, and they start understanding a little bit things better, gets fine-tuned, then perhaps the hand-holding is a little bit lower and there's a little bit more trust in them to do more things. But it sounds like it's very much the level of diligence of each company is the same as if it was an employee. And there are companies that will hire somebody and just tell them nothing, explain very little, and leave them to it. And all the things that can happen do happen. And then there's employees that do heavy hand-holding and have very good systems, very strong systems, and they spend a lot of time working with their teams. To me, that's exactly the same sort of thing. Is that right?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And not only that, I would add that once you have really trained this junior employee that you onboarded, you're on to the next phase. So you're now providing this junior person with more tasks, so you have to retrain it again. So yes, he's now trained on the previous tasks that you granted him or that you've given him, but now you have to train him again because you're rolling the second phase of the workflow, for example. So now you need to feed him with new information. So it's a never-ending improvement loop, I would say.
Nick, let's switch gears a bit and look at Kyero's product service called Prime AI. the vast majority of visitors who land on Kyero.com, they use the default sort order for property results, but Prime AI plays around with that. What was the goal for Prime AI, and what does it do to those search results?
Yeah, so Prime AI is the brand name, which we launched, I think, 2 or 3 years ago now. I think this is before everything was something AI. But yeah, it really encompasses a suite of features. I guess there's two sides to it. There's the agent-facing side, and that's the suite of features where we deduplicate listings using fuzzy logic. We do natural language processing to identify features that the agent hasn't put, so that we can associate properties with more filtered search results. We use AI, generative AI, for property description translations. So all of those are part of Prime AI, and they're all about improving the quality of the listings so that we're able to show better quality listings and show those listings to more people as they filter. And so we give a much better set of results. The front side of that is that Prime AI is a recommendation engine. So similar to, you would go on to Netflix or something, or any number of services, and we're trying to show users one of the most popular properties, the properties that we think will convert, but also Prime AI, I mentioned earlier. So Prime AI is a machine learning, based on a machine learning algorithm. So that tries to put properties higher or lower in the results, in our recommended sort results. But it's also a hybrid model as well. So we have a commercial aspect to it. Agents are obviously paying us for visibility, for where their properties are shown in the results, and we're trying to deliver a level of performance for those agents as well. So it tries to serve users who Prime AI is completely invisible to. So we don't have any sort of AI gimmicks or anything on the front end that you're looking at AI results or anything like that. We're just trying to show the best quality results to the right people at the right time and deliver that performance for agents at the same time.
So when and why did your team decide to build this? Portal algorithms can make estate agents incredibly nervous. So how was Prime AI initially received by your clients on the ground?
I think it can make agents nervous because their primary goal is to get as much visibility and as many inquiries for the money as they can. Actually, the older model was effectively, we would show the most recent properties. So fairly simple. That would be the default sort for a long time. That has inherent issues, and we had years and years of issues with it's able to be manipulated quite easily. So agents would commonly be deleting properties, adding properties. Not all agents, but some agents, and that can obviously adversely affect the results and the experience that users get as they come onto the site and see a new property, which is clearly not a new property. So that there was an effort to prevent that from happening, and we tried various strategies to do that, and it didn't really work. So Prime AI was providing better quality results while still attempting to deliver good results for all agents and a fair set of results for all agents. So one agent isn't manipulating at the detriment to another agent. I think we also had we were actually, as a sort of side effect of it, at the time we had featured properties, which you'll see on many portals, those top 3 properties that are just stuck at the top of the results, whether you're looking for that property or not, or you end up with, some portals have so many featured properties that the first few pages are featured and effectively none are featured. So at the same
tiered
time,
ones, right? There are some that are tiered, where it's like platinum, silver,
super
gold,
featured, and then featured,
diamond,
and,
right? Yeah,
and I feel, and I think most visitors to, whether it's to Kyero, whether it's to Amazon or whatever, you see these sponsored results and you're trying to get past that to see the real organic results and to have that kind of experience. So we were able to, one, combat the problem we had with just recency, as it didn't matter, what the property type was. We could have 50 garages or commercial properties at the top of the results when somebody's looking for an apartment. And of course, that's not the typical experience that somebody wants. So it really enabled us, regardless of the techniques we used and the tools we used to achieve it. The goal was to produce a better set of results and a more performant experience for both visitors and agents.
I know it's been running live. How's it going? What does the data say about the efficiency of Prime AI?
So certainly as a straight comparison at the time, because it's been a while now, and now I think 90 all agents are on Prime AI, so that transition has kind of happened. But at the time, it was just a general 40% improvement in visibility for agents who at that time had gone on to Prime AI compared to other agents. So we could quickly see that it seems silly to say it, by giving a better set of results to users, they interact with properties more often and generally make more inquiries. As you said, most users don't change the sort order. So they land on a location page with a set of results and just go through the results one by one. Now, we might have 50 pages of results, and the average user won't normally go deeper in the results than 8 to 10. So that means 40 pages of properties that never get seen and would never get seen, really, from that typical user. Now the results are changing constantly. Any property could be at the top of the results if it's popular enough or has gained enough traction. We will try and identify properties that are low down in the results that are getting more interaction than anticipated and try and push those up the results. So try and surface, the hidden gems rather than just letting properties languish over time. Equally, we won't just leave properties at the top of the results that are getting no interaction. They would naturally drop down the order as well.
A quick question on that. I was surprised to hear how many people don't change the filter. Like, I assumed I couldn't wrap my head around this idea of Prime AI affecting the default set of results, order of results, thinking, well, that's, how does it affect if I search from cheapest to highest or 2-bedroom to this or whatever? How can you influence that? Surely delivering what I've asked for. But I don't remember which one of you told me, but the percentage of people that don't do that and literally look at the default set of results is really high, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. You're talking sort of 80% of users will just look at the results. And I think that highlights the sort of the funnel stages of most users is that a lot of people they're just not ready to make an inquiry yet. They're having a look. They're window shopping at that point. They're not deeper down into their journey. They may well make inquiries as well. At that point, if you stumble across something, there's a cheap or, something that just matches your interest right at that time. But I guess you could argue it's more of that sort of Instagram type feed. I'm looking through and I'm interested in possibly moving to Spain, but have no definites at that time. And I think
looking for inspiration kind of thing.
Yeah. And so that's very much something that we work on as well. We'll try and then funnel those people down into an information-based journey or try and recognize them as different personas on the journey and try and serve them in a different way. Try and educate them into the buying process and how easy or not it is to make a move and how to retire or how to, move your family and education, those sort of things. But yeah, most people, and I think it's this, whether it's higher on Kyero or not for that sort of international buyer niche, but in most portals, I'm thinking of, Idealista or something, I'm sure, you're sat at home, you're just browsing and looking at the market as well. So there are those type of people seeing what's on the market, seeing what's available with no defined, I am definitely moving. And so not necessarily, at that point of conversion yet.
Prime AI addresses the really difficult balance between keeping the agents happy and keeping the buyers happy, and it does it intelligently. Because if you just let the agents do what they want, it's going to be, like I said, 15 garages in a row. And if you just do the buyer stuff, you won't have much influence to be able to monetize it.
You raised a really interesting observation there, Nick, that Prime AI replaced a system that wasn't working optimally. And I think it's a mistake we often make with AI systems. We think of them as the new scary thing, but actually we're implementing them as businesses because the old thing didn't work, was imperfect. And Eugenio said the same thing about the HubSpot system and the 150 automations. If the old thing was working, we'd have left it alone, or you would have left it alone. But there were gaps in those systems that, in both of your cases, AI has enabled you to provide a better service. And I think with Prime AI, the way you described it, Nick, it's a complicated market-making system that the old approach was just too dumb to succeed for agents and buyers. Is that a fair summary?
I think it is, yeah. It was very simplistic. And, it is something that's still used. So many portals will use it. Some of the biggest portals in the world will just have, highest price first or whatever. So, to try and, and as Eugenio said, these things don't stop either. We're always looking at improvements, and agents will constantly contact us and say, how can I improve my appearance on Kyero? How do I get more inquiries? And so we will analyze them and look at whether it's listing quality or what else they could do to try and get more inquiries, try and give them some sort of market intelligence or intelligence into their whole property portfolio, what other agents are doing in the area. Obviously, it's a completely different market in the sort of sub 100,000 apartment market in Almeria compared to the million plus villa market in Marbella, and the expectations of what is good performance as well varies greatly.
Okay, so now a question for you, Eugenio. As I understand it, you've experimented with autonomous AI agents internally. What did you try and what did you learn?
Well, we did try an experiment with autonomous agents. The idea was basically to unleash a set of agents that would represent a commercial team with different roles: support, account executive, client success manager, et cetera, and have them do the front facing with customers. But we never unleashed those. It was not just the right setup for a company like ours, at least with the data set that we have today, with the knowledge base that we have today. It's a completely different game. And you need to be really well prepared to sort of unleash an army of autonomous AI agents and have them represent your company. It's not that you can't do it. I'm really in favor of doing it if you're ready for it. But in our case, we realized that the work frame that we had was not the best one for this to be a successful project. So they are still there, waiting to be unleashed, but we need to put our house in order before doing something with them. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. How about you, Nick, on the buyer side? Have you got any plans to do any buyer-facing stuff with AI agents?
We are, yes. So we're implementing, I guess, so I'm a big fan of self-service. And, and I think if somebody's asking a question, it's because we're not already providing the answer. And so we're trying to build the buyer-facing service about answering the questions and helping the buyer do actions. So let's think of something. So a common email in from buyers would be, how do I change my alerts, or how do I change the frequency of my alerts? That can all be done on their control panel. But obviously the visibility of that to the person isn't high enough that they still need to answer that. So for us to be able to introduce systems where the buyer can ask a straightforward question like that and get the answer immediately, not in office hours or waiting for somebody to come. So a structured question with a structured answer, we can answer those questions without anybody getting involved and be safe in the knowledge, that this isn't somebody who's asking for an opinion about it. It's a definite action.
That's interesting. That's certainly my experience with chatting with AI support staff, is that I'm willing to do it if I get a good enough answer immediately. It's better than waiting for a human answer maybe next week.
Yeah, regarding that, Martin, something that's replicating that approach that you just said. N8N, for example, If you inquire about something, you'll get an automated response via email answering your query that says, this is an automated response, AI generated, whatever, blah, 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 blah. If you want to speak to a human, you might have to wait 48 hours, click here. So it's on you. You ask something, I'm providing you with the answer. If you still want to speak to a human, no worries, click here. It might take up to 48 hours. And I think that's a very good commercial approach or support approach. Obviously, a company like N8N can do it. It's not easy enough for us to, but I think that's a really good approach because it's a hybrid model.
Yes, and also you're giving the customer a choice. I think where AI chatbots fail is when they're pretending to be human, but they're not as good as they're not human. So the expectation is wrong from the beginning. And in sales, Eugenio, do you have any plans to allow AI to autonomously answer agent queries?
Yes, that's on the roadmap of the ARIS system. Definitely, the idea, in fact, was to have it launched, to have that capability launched and deployed by mid-year, and we're already behind schedule because of all the blockers that we encountered that we were speaking about. But yes, that's the idea. I think that for, like Nick said, for very specific tasks and for very specific parts of the process, we could definitely have an autonomous agent taking over those emails, queries, and whatever. I think that we will be soon in a position that will allow us to do that in a couple of months. Once the database is clean, our work frame is solid enough, I think we would be able to do it. Yeah.
And I'm guessing your principles of estimate, don't guesstimate, and a human review in the loop will continue in that situation too.
100%, absolutely 100%. And deployment done by phases. I think that's the key about this. I mean, I would never, ever just unleash an autonomous AI agent to go and do space fronting with our agents. So yeah.
Nick, let me bounce back to you. The people listening to this podcast are estate agents thinking, how do I use AI in my business? Where is it useful? Where is it safe? Where is it dangerous? What's one piece of advice you would give them?
I think it would be giving your team permission to use AI is probably the best. So if you're not using AI at all, allow your team to be using AI, but importantly, make sure that they're sharing that experience. So whether there's a weekly meeting to show what I've been doing and what you've been doing, what's working, what's not working. Thinking of, in general, the kind of AI chat tools that are out there at the moment. I think that until people start experimenting, you have no experience of it at work, you don't know the capabilities yet. So that would be the simplest thing to do. Internally, from an engineer, actually from most of the team now, we use Claude, and we're using Claude because that's a single tool that everyone's using, and that gives us the ability to share projects and share prompts, share ideas. So that allows us all to work together rather than everybody using a different tool here and there, whatever's the hot tool this week or next week, which seems to be the case.
Thank you. So to summarizing your advice there, start using it, start encouraging the use of it, and be open and share about how you're getting on.
Exactly. Yeah.
How about you, Eugenio? What would you say to an agent who's thinking about dabbling with this stuff?
I think I would tell them, be prepared to invest time, resources, and some money into this. This is not something, these systems are not built overnight, and you really need to have your house in order so that you can put AI into a system and make it work. So I would say just be prepared to invest some time, resources, and money, and put your house in order before getting started.
Yeah, thank you. I think there is a common misconception that this is some kind of magic trick that you just flip the switch and all your problems are solved.
If you don't have a process for AI to optimize or to leverage, I mean, there's nothing for AI to do there. That's my point of view.
Thank you. How about you, Alfredo? What's your takeaway from this one?
Mine's probably a little bit different to everybody else's. There's a misconception that estate agents want to talk to portals. I think that in a lot of cases, the insistence of the portal to speak to the estate agents when they have a question that they want answering is one of the biggest points of frustration, and it's just seen as a way of selling them or upgrading them to something else. So I think from an estate agent point of view, I think that 99% of everything that they want from a portal can be automated, should be automated, and the estate agent wants it to be automated. If I want a price from Idealista based on 25 properties in Marbella, I want a price. I don't want a meeting and a conversation and a follow-up and a really complicated proposal. What's the price, man? And that happens a lot of the time. Whenever you try to ask something that even touches, especially commercial, that's it. You got to get married to them. And you just have a question. So I think estate agents are probably listening to people like us, worried about losing that humanity, going, you're a tech company. You don't need to be human. I think there are certain points, however, which I think as long as there's like a safe switch where if you do want to talk to a human, you can, to an actual human person within the brand, then I think you tick all the boxes. So I want to know the price, but I got a few questions I want to ask, and I don't want to talk to a bot. It gives me the answer, and then it says, but you want to talk to someone, just click here, and you can actually talk to somebody. I think that is the least amount of friction and the most welcome thing from estate agents. So we have that relationship, but sometimes that relationship comes at the expense of efficiency, meaning I love you guys, Kyero, right? You guys are the nicest portal on the planet. I think everybody says that. But I know you're busy, and as nice as you are, rather than having a chat next Wednesday about that price for 25 listings, can I just have the price? And then if I have a chin wag with you or just sort of shoot the breeze about the different options, I can ask for that. And I think if we can find that balance, I think everybody will be happy. That's my view.
Really interesting. Yeah, thanks, Alfredo. It's certainly easy for all of us in business to look at the world from inside our little bubble, and being able to see it from the outside and see what's actually required of us is a good reminder. Thanks, gentlemen. That was really interesting. Lovely to see you both again. Join us next week as we begin to wrap up this second season of the Kyero Pro podcast. We'll be speaking with a change management expert, and the interesting thing, I think, will be about how AI is changing leadership and what it means to be a business owner. Join us next week for that one.